Hi, I'm Marlene. My parents moved without telling me, left my photos in the trash like I'd never existed. My son found them. He cried, and that's when I realized they didn't just forget us. They wanted us gone, but they didn't expect what came next. Before we get into it, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it there? Drop a comment. Because if you've ever been quietly erased by the people who should love you most, this story is for you. When Kendra's message popped up on my phone, it almost felt like a mistake. Just one line, dinner this Sunday. Would be nice to see you and Eli. No emojis, no, hope you're well, just that. I stared at it for a long time, uncertain if I should even tell Eli. But the second I did, his whole face lit up. Really? He said, like Christmas came early. We're going to Grandma's? I wanted to say no. I wanted to say this isn't how family should work. Radio silence for months. Then suddenly an invitation like nothing happened. But I couldn't take that look away from his face. So I smiled and nodded. Yeah, sweetheart. Sunday dinner. That evening, as I packed his backpack with a spare shirt and his sketchbook, I reminded myself this wasn't about me. It wasn't about old wounds or fake pleasantries. This was for Eli. To let him feel like he still belonged somewhere, even if I didn't. Sunday came with the kind of summer light that made everything look softer than it felt. As we pulled into the driveway, the house looked like it always had. Pristine lawn, flower beds trimmed perfectly, not a single toy out of place. But it wasn't the same house, not to me. Kendra opened the door, arms wide, perfume sharp and familiar. Lavender, always lavender. You look great, she said, brushing a kiss against my cheek like we hadn't gone a year without a proper conversation. Eli, you're getting so big. He bolted past her, excited to see his cousins. I stepped in more slowly, my senses on high alert. The smell of garlic bread wafted from the kitchen, laughter from the den. And yet, no one said, "We've missed you." Cliff nodded from the couch, eyes glued to the game. Verna stood at the kitchen island, slicing lemons for her tea. Her back was stiff, her mouth tight when she turned. "Oh," she said. "You're early." "Just 10 minutes," I replied. She didn't answer, just kept slicing. It wasn't until dinner was being set that I noticed it. The table was nearly full. Chairs set, napkins folded, drinks poured. But there were no spots for me or Eli. Everyone else had a place, even the kids. I hovered for a moment, waiting for someone to notice. No one did. So I walked into the kitchen and quietly grabbed 2 folding chairs from the pantry. I carried them out myself, one in each hand, trying not to let it sting. Eli stood beside me, confused. "Mom," he whispered, "they forgot us." I gave him a smile that felt like sandpaper on my teeth. "They probably just ran out of time, baby." But I knew better. Dinner passed like a scene from a movie I was never cast in. Conversations danced over my head, promotions, soccer games, cruise plans. No one asked how I was doing. No one asked Eli about school. It was as if we were props at our own table. After we ate, Eli pulled something out of his backpack. A crayon drawing, our whole family holding hands, standing in front of this very house. He had written "Family Forever" in bold green letters. He ran to Verna and handed it to her with both hands. "I made this for you, Grandma." She looked at it for all of 3 seconds, then placed it beside the shoe rack without a word. Didn't even thank him. My jaw tightened. Eli came back to our chairs and leaned toward me. "Do you think she liked it?" I looked at him, his hopeful little face, his quiet bravery. "Of course she did," I lied. I wanted to grab that drawing and tape it to the center of the fridge where everyone had to see it. But I didn't. I let it sit there like an afterthought. Because that's how we were being treated, like afterthoughts. As dessert was served, no one noticed that Eli's plate was still empty. I reached for the pie myself and served him quietly. The conversations continued like we were made of glass, transparent, easy to look through, easy to ignore. When it was finally time to leave, I stood and helped Eli into his jacket. He gave hugs to everyone who would take one. Verna gave him a pat on the head. Kendra handed me a Tupperware of leftovers like that made us even. I was almost out the door when I turned and looked toward the family photo wall. It had been redone. New frames, brighter lighting, careful arrangement. But something was missing. We were missing. Not one picture of Eli, not one of me. Just perfect smiles from a perfectly chosen version of this family. As I stood there, my heart squeezed in a way I hadn't felt since Dean left. That same cold realization, I don't belong here anymore. I put my hand on Eli's shoulder and guided him out. He looked up at me and asked, "Can we come again next Sunday?" I didn't answer. I just said goodnight and shut the car door. I didn't say a word as I buckled Eli into the back seat. He was still smiling, humming softly, oblivious to the quiet war playing out behind my eyes. But as I walked around the car to the driver's side, I paused. The porch light cast a yellow haze over the house, its walls full of stories I no longer belonged to. And there, just beyond the open window, I saw it clearly. The photo wall. Framed memories. Perfectly aligned. Kendra at the beach with her kids. Liam's kindergarten graduation. A shot of Dean, my ex-husband, standing proudly beside Verna in a photo I recognized. It used to be the three of us. But in this version, I had been cropped out, replaced with a strip of background blur. I stared, frozen, my fingers tightening on the car door handle. Eli's voice from the back seat brought me back. "Mom, can we get ice cream on the way home?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Sure, baby." We drove in silence. He talked about the dog Kendra got for her kids. I nodded along, but my thoughts kept drifting back to that wall. My mother hadn't just removed me from her home. She had deleted us. From her memories, from her story. Carefully, intentionally. Back home, I tucked Eli into bed. He kissed my cheek, curled up with his stuffed otter, and fell asleep within minutes. I stayed in the doorway for a while, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Then I sat down on the couch, pulled out my phone, and started scrolling through old family group texts. They hadn't been active in months. No new messages, no check-ins, no photos. I opened my gallery, started going through the pictures I'd taken over the years. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, beach days. I stopped at one. Verna holding Eli the day he was born. She had insisted we print it for her wall. She said, "First grandson deserves to be seen every day." But now, not even a corner of that image remained. A few days later, I decided to stop by their house again, alone this time. Edgar, their neighbor, had asked for my chicken enchilada casserole recipe, and I figured I could drop off a dish while I was at it. When I pulled into the driveway, the place felt colder somehow. Not physically, but emotionally muted. I rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Cliff opened the door. He looked surprised, but not unkind. "Hey, Marlene," he said, stepping aside. "Everything all right?" "I just brought this over for Edgar," I said, lifting the foil-covered pan. "Figured I'd save him from eating another frozen pizza." Cliff chuckled. "That man's blood must be 40% cheese by now." We stood there for a beat. I took a breath, kept my voice even. I noticed the photo wall was different the other night. Cliff scratched the back of his neck. "Oh, yeah. Verna redid it. Wanted to freshen things up," she said. "I didn't see any pictures of Eli," I said carefully. "Or me." He avoided my gaze, shifting on his feet. "Well, you know how women are with decorating," he mumbled. "I stay out of it." I looked at him, really looked. This man, my son's grandfather, had nothing to say. No protest, no surprise, just detachment disguised as neutrality. "You stayed out of it during my divorce too," I said quietly. Cliff opened his mouth, then closed it. His silence was louder than any argument. I handed him the casserole and turned away. As I walked back to my car, I felt an odd clarity settling in. Cliff didn't hate me. He wasn't cruel, but he was weak. And weak men are just as dangerous as the ones who throw punches, because they let damage happen and call it not getting involved. At home, I opened my laptop and began deleting photos. Not all of them, just the ones that reminded me of how hard I tried to fit in. I wasn't erasing my history. I was pruning it, cutting out the dead parts so something new might grow. Later that night, Eli padded out of his room in socks and climbed into bed beside me. His small fingers found mine beneath the covers. "Mom?" he whispered. "Yeah, sweetheart?" He hesitated. "Do you think they'd hang my picture if I wasn't your kid?" I felt my breath catch, like a punch I didn't see coming. I wanted to say of course they would. I wanted to lie, but I couldn't. Instead, I squeezed his hand and kissed the top of his head. "You don't need a wall to prove you matter," I whispered. "You're the best thing I've ever done." But in the dark, I made a silent promise. They would never hurt him again. I didn't sleep after he asked that. His little voice kept echoing in my ears, bouncing around inside me like it didn't want to leave. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many more ways they could find to tell us we weren't family. The next morning, I moved through the kitchen like I was wading through wet cement, coffee in hand, eyes unfocused. Eli sat at the counter, quietly drawing with a stubby crayon. He didn't ask for cereal, didn't sing to himself like usual. Something in him had dimmed, and I hated how familiar it felt. After I dropped him off at school, I sat in the car outside the grocery store, trying to summon the energy to go inside. That's when I pulled out my phone, pure reflex, and opened Facebook. The first thing that hit me was a photo, bright, festive, loud. Kendra's living room packed with balloons, streamers, and kids. Liam stood at the center, grinning with frosting on his cheeks, surrounded by cousins. All of them, except Eli. The caption read, "Thank you to everyone who made Liam's birthday so special. So grateful for our tight-knit tribe." I stared at the screen, frozen. I hadn't even known there was a party. No invite, no message, not even a passive-aggressive, "hope you're free." My hands started to shake. My name wasn't tagged. Eli's wasn't mentioned. There were photos of Cliff and Verna, both beaming beside the cake. Kendra's husband, Kendra's best friend, even Edgar, the neighbor, smiling in the background. But not us. We didn't just miss a party. We had been deliberately cut out. Again. That night, as I scrolled through my phone on the couch, Eli climbed up beside me and peeked over my shoulder. "Was that Liam's party?" he asked. I tried to tilt the phone away, but it was too late. "Yeah, bud," I said gently. He blinked. "Why didn't they invite me?" I could feel something raw rising up in my throat. "I don't know," I whispered. "Maybe it was a small thing. Maybe they just forgot." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat up straighter. "Can we bake something for him?" he asked. "Like cupcakes? I could decorate them with his favorite colors. He loves green and blue." I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't take that tiny flicker of hope away from him. Not yet. "Yeah," I said, my voice hoarse. "That's a sweet idea." The next morning, we baked together. I let him crack the eggs and stir the batter, even though most of it ended up on the counter. We iced the vanilla cupcakes, green swirls, blue dots, shaky little hearts. He beamed with pride as we boxed them up and drove across town. The whole ride there, he held the box like it was made of glass. When we pulled up to Verna's house, he jumped out, racing to the porch like this was the best day of his life. I followed behind, slower, heart pounding in my ears. He knocked. The door opened a few seconds later. Verna stood there in her robe, looking like she hadn't expected anyone, even though her car was in the driveway. Her eyes darted past me before landing on Eli. "Hi, sweetie," she said, surprised. Eli held up the box with both hands. "We made cupcakes for Liam's birthday. I wanted to say happy birthday in person." Verna smiled, tight and uneasy. She stepped out just enough to block the doorway. "Now's not a great time, sweetheart. Maybe next weekend, okay?" Eli's arms didn't move. I just wanted to give them to him." She reached out, gently pushing the box back toward him. "I'll tell Liam you said hi." Then the door closed. Eli turned around slowly. He didn't cry. He didn't ask questions. He just walked back to the car and climbed into his seat. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He stared at the box in his lap. "I guess they don't like vanilla," he said. That line, it hit me in the chest like a punch. I gripped the wheel so hard my fingers ached. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The kind of rage I felt wasn't loud. It was clean, controlled, focused. When we got home, he sat at the kitchen table in silence. I unpacked the cupcakes, placing them carefully in the fridge like they still meant something. Like they weren't just a reminder of how unwelcome we were. That night, after his shower and story time, he crawled under the covers, pulling his stuffed daughter close. "Mom?" he said quietly. I turned off the light and sat beside him. "Yeah, baby? Maybe if I were more like Liam, they'd love me too." I swallowed the fire burning up my throat, leaned in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "No. Maybe if they loved you, they'd act like it." I stayed quiet, not because I lacked words, but because I had too many. That one sentence from Eli, whispered in the dark, kept burning at the edges of my thoughts like an ember I couldn't stamp out. Morning light streamed through the blinds, but everything felt dimmer. I made him waffles, extra syrup, his favorite, and he smiled like nothing had happened. Kids are resilient, sure, but they also know how to pretend. I saw it in his eyes when he looked down at the syrup more than at me. Around noon, my phone rang. "Unknown number?" I answered cautiously. "Marlene?" It was my mother. Her voice was syrupy smooth, like she was playing a role she hadn't quite rehearsed. "I've been meaning to call. Things have just been tense." I stayed silent. She continued, "Your father and I, well, we've been going through a lot lately, financial stress mostly." And then she slipped it in, casual as a breeze but cold as sleet. "You know, if we hadn't needed to help you so much during your divorce, maybe our retirement wouldn't have taken such a hit. Kendra's been picking up the slack." I sat up straighter. "What?" I said slowly. "You know," she added, her tone now edged with martyrdom, "covering what you couldn't. The bills, the family gifts, dinners. She stepped up." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom," I said, calm but shaking inside, "I never asked you for help. And the only person who ever asked for money was Kendra when she needed to borrow for her startup." Verna was quiet. Then she said, "Let's not argue over old things. What matters now is keeping peace." Peace. That word hit me like an insult. I ended the call politely and tossed my phone onto the couch. It bounced once, landing screen down like even it didn't want to hear anymore. I didn't know Eli had been listening until I heard the soft pad of his footsteps. He stood in the doorway, wide-eyed, clutching his sketchpad to his chest. He didn't ask questions. He just walked over and gave me a quick hug before retreating to his room. It wasn't the hug that undid me, it was the silence. The fact that he already understood this was the kind of moment adults didn't want to talk about. Later that week, I stopped by the grocery store after work. Eli was at a playdate, and I thought maybe I could distract myself with something mundane, like choosing pasta sauce. I turned down the baking aisle and nearly bumped into Jennifer, an old friend of the family who used to teach Eli art when he was smaller. "Marlene," she said brightly, "I just dropped off some blueberry muffins at your parents' new place. That garden of theirs? Adorable." My stomach dropped. "They're what?" I asked. Jennifer tilted her head. "Their new house, over on Hillside Lane? I assumed you'd been." I shook my head. "No, I didn't even know they moved." Jennifer's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I really thought you knew." I nodded once, grabbed the nearest jar of tomato sauce I could find, and left the cart behind as I walked straight out the door. In the car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, staring out the windshield, but not seeing anything. They moved, and didn't tell me, not even a text. I thought of that party, the wall of photos, the door that closed on Eli's face, the missing cupcakes, the accusation that I ruined their finances, the friend who delivered muffins to a home I wasn't even allowed to know existed. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't grief. It wasn't getting older or letting things go. This was a pattern, a deliberate effort to cut us out, clean, surgical, final. I didn't remember driving home. I only remembered standing in the hallway, staring at the picture Eli had drawn of the family, the one Verna had tossed near the shoes. He'd redrawn it recently, hung it with painter's tape near the fridge. Everyone was still there, still smiling. And then I remembered something else. When Eli was born, Verna printed his photo and said, "This baby makes us whole." Now, he wasn't even worth an address update. That night, after dinner and homework and one more cup of cocoa than I'd usually allow, Eli crawled under the covers and asked in the smallest voice, "Do you think they moved so we couldn't find them?" I sat on the edge of his bed. My hand brushed his hair, but my voice didn't come right away. "I don't know," I whispered, because anything else would have been a lie. But inside, something snapped. They don't get to erase us quietly anymore. By sunrise Saturday morning, I wasn't interested in staying silent anymore. Something in me had shifted. Like a door that had been cracked open for years was finally thrown wide. I made Eli breakfast, got him dressed, and grabbed the key from the drawer. The extra copy to my parents' house they'd never once asked me to return. I didn't tell him exactly where we were going. I just said, "We're checking on something," and he nodded. He was always quiet in the mornings, and today wasn't any different. But I caught him glancing at me more than usual, as if he knew I wasn't in the mood to explain what was already obvious. We pulled into the driveway like we had so many times before, only this time the place looked off. The lawn was freshly mowed. Verna always hired someone for that, but the flower beds were fading fast. The once careful rows of marigolds were wilting, the soil dry and cracked. It was like someone had pressed pause on care just long enough for everything to start unraveling. I walked up to the front door and knocked once. Then again. No answer. I tried the key. The lock clicked. And as the door opened, I knew before I even stepped inside. The house was empty. Not quiet. Not just still. Empty. No couches. No rugs. No framed pictures. Not even the familiar tick of that ridiculous grandfather clock Verna used to brag about. I stepped in slowly, Eli's footsteps soft behind mine. The air inside was different, hollow, stale. Dust patterns still marked where furniture used to be, the kitchen table gone, the wall of curated family photos stripped bare. There was no goodbye, no forwarding address, no note taped to the counter like you'd expect when someone moves. Just blank walls and silence. I didn't cry. Not yet. As we stepped back out, I heard someone call from across the street. "Marlene!" It was Edgar, their neighbor, the same man who brought homemade pies every Thanksgiving like clockwork. He walked over slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey, I thought maybe you already knew." "Knew what?" I asked, even though I didn't want to hear it out loud. "They moved. Last week, I think." Verna told me they were downsizing, nothing dramatic. Said they'd told everyone already. Everyone but me. "Did she give you their new address?" I asked, calm as ice. He shook his head. "Nope. Just said they'd send out a Christmas card once they got settled." That was it. I nodded, thanked him, and turned back to the car. Eli tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, the trash bins." They were still out by the curb. 3 of them, lid cracked, sun beating down on the plastic. Eli opened the nearest one and leaned over, squinting. Then his hand flew to his mouth. "Mom," he said, voice shaking, "come here." Inside, scattered like broken pieces of a timeline, were things I'd forgotten even existed. A photo of me holding Eli on his first birthday, creased and torn down the middle, one of his handmade cards, smudged marker, crooked hearts, a little stick figure labeled Grandma. A crumpled drawing, barely legible now, with blocky crayon letters. "Our Family," by Eli. I reached down and gently lifted the drawing. My fingertips brushed the edge of it like it might fall apart with one more second of air. I didn't cry. I just closed the lid and placed my hand on top of it like a gravestone. We got back in the car. I buckled him in. My movements were smooth, calm, deliberate. He looked out the window, not blinking. "Are we still their family?" he asked. This time, I didn't hesitate. "No," I said, "because family doesn't throw you away." He didn't speak after that. He just rested his head against the glass, watching the houses pass as we drove off. That night, after he went to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table, the one they never invited me back to, and opened my laptop. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I opened a new email. Subject line: emotional exclusion and evidence of malice toward a minor. I attached pictures of the trashed artwork, the timeline of missed events, a copy of Kendra's birthday post, the voicemail from Verna about finances. Then I hit send. By noon the next day, I had a reply. Danica's voice was calm, clipped, and professional, But what she said made me feel like the ground beneath me had solidified for the first time in years. "You have a case," she said. "This isn't just emotional exclusion. It borders on psychological harm to a minor, premeditated, intentional, and well-documented." Her words came with weight, but also with something sharper. Validation. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't the hysterical daughter who took things too personally. I was a mother doing exactly what needed to be done. We spent the rest of the call going through the details. I uploaded every screenshot I had, texts from Verna, subtle guilt trips from Kendra, ignored birthday messages, backhanded responses to Eli's drawings. I even found a few old voicemails, one from Kendra last Christmas that said, "It might be easier if you just dropped him off. The family dynamic's been tense lately, and we don't want him feeling awkward." Danica asked if I had any recordings. I remembered Eli's smartwatch had a voice memo feature. Sure enough, there were dozens of short files, harmless kid chatter mostly, but one of them captured the vote night. Clear as day. Belle's voice suggesting the vote. My name spoken like an inconvenience. Someone murmuring, "She's too sensitive, she always was." Danica's team got to work that same day. The cease and desist letter was crisp, relentless, and bulletproof. It documented emotional exclusion. It highlighted specific events. It named names. And at the heart of it all, it laid bare the evidence of harm done to a 10-year-old boy who had never once stopped loving them. I was still reviewing the PDF when I heard Eli scream from his room. I ran in, heart pounding, only to find him sitting upright in bed, sweat-soaked and trembling. He looked at me like I might disappear. "They threw my pictures away," he sobbed. "What if they want to throw me away too?" It broke me. I climbed into bed beside him and wrapped my arms around his little body. "They don't get to touch you again," I whispered into his hair. "You're mine, and no one throws you away." We stayed like that until he fell asleep again, his breath hitching a little less with each minute. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay beside him, watching the dark ceiling and letting the rage inside me crystallize into something useful. The next morning, the letters went out, one by one, certified, signed. Each adult who'd participated in Eli's exclusion received one. No prior warning, not even a hint. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a text. I didn't post anything online. I just waited. By noon, Verna texted, "We need to talk. This has gone too far." By 3 p.m., Kendra left a voicemail dripping with performative indignation. "A lawyer? Seriously, Marlene? What is wrong with you?" I didn't respond, because now it wasn't about getting them to care. It was about making sure they never had the chance to hurt him again. Later that evening, Danica called to confirm that all letters were received and legally acknowledged. "If anyone responds with anything other than full compliance," she said calmly, "we escalate. You have every right." I stared out the kitchen window while she spoke. The sun was starting to dip, casting golden light across the backyard. I imagined Eli out there again, 3 years old, chasing bubbles, yelling, "Look, Mama," while Verna clapped and Kendra took pictures. That memory didn't sting the way it used to, because now I understood the truth. They hadn't changed. I had. My phone vibrated against the table 3 times in a row. Verna, then Kendra, then a number I didn't recognize. I didn't even flinch. I let it buzz until the screen went dark again. Danica's words echoed in my head. "If they respond with anything beyond compliance, we escalate." And silence? That was me escalating. It was a strange kind of peace, this quiet refusal to engage. I'd spent years contorting myself into someone more palatable, less direct, more forgiving, always ready with a nervous smile and a soft, "It's fine." But now I wasn't returning their calls. I wasn't softening their blows for them anymore. That evening, after putting Eli to bed, I went into my old email to search for a lost confirmation receipt. I stumbled across a login reminder for an app we'd all used years ago to share family pictures. Out of curiosity, or maybe masochism, I clicked in. It was still active. There were dozens of new uploads. Beach photos, someone's graduation, a baby shower I hadn't been invited to. Every picture carefully filtered, every caption filled with emojis and inside jokes. I tried to comment. Access denied. I clicked through the settings. Then I saw it. Group name, Real Family Thread. I stared at those 3 words for a long time. My chest tightened, but not with sadness. This time, it was disgust. They didn't just remove me from their lives. They created a whole digital space to celebrate the exclusion. Photoshopped perfection for the world to see. No room for nuance. No room for Eli. No room for truth. The next morning, Danica forwarded me a copy of an email from Kendra's lawyer. It was thinly veiled panic disguised as professionalism. We'd like to explore a path of healing and open dialogue. Our client is concerned about the emotional escalation and believes this may be resolved without further legal action. Translation? They were scared. Scared of how it looked. Scared of what I had. Scared that maybe, just maybe, people were starting to see through the curated narrative they'd crafted for so long. And they were right to be. Later that day, I noticed something unexpected. A ripple effect. Comments on Kendra's latest Instagram post, once filled with "love this" and "beautiful family," now had a different tone. Wait, didn't she have a sister? Wasn't her son best friends with her nephew? Didn't they all used to live nearby? It spread like wildfire, quiet but cutting. I walked into Eli's school that afternoon to pick him up, and something had shifted. The usual silence I got from other parents was replaced by nods, gentle smiles, a couple of quiet, knowing glances. Even Mr. Barnett, the PE teacher, walked by and said, "Good for you, Marlene. A lot of people would have just kept their head down." I nodded, throat thick with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dignity. I didn't feel like a victim anymore. And I wasn't the villain they'd painted either. I was the line. That night, after dinner, I opened a fresh document on my computer. I began organizing every email, every message, every voicemail I could remember. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Out of love for my son, for myself. I wasn't trying to get back into the family. I was building a life outside of it. One that didn't require walking on eggshells or pretending holidays didn't hurt. One that didn't rely on people who treated love like a transaction. I was halfway through sorting files when a message popped up on my phone. The name was blocked, but I knew the tone the moment I read it. "If you ruin this family, you'll regret it. Kendra." I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Words filled my head, some too sharp, some too honest. But I didn't type any of them. Not yet. Not this time. I just let the message sit there, unanswered. Let her wait. I didn't hit send. Instead, I closed the message, turned my phone over, and watched the screen go black. Kendra's threat lingered in the air like a sour aftertaste, but it didn't burn the way it used to. Not anymore. The truth had already outlived their denials. Sunday came quiet and cool, the sky layered with soft Oregon clouds. Eli was sketching spaceships at the kitchen table while I made coffee. A strange peace settled into my chest, uneasy but stable, until I opened my laptop. A notification popped up from an old friend of mine, Cora, someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. The message was short. "You okay?" With it, she included a screenshot. Kendra had posted a photo on Facebook and Instagram, a family portrait, professionally lit, posed in front of their new house. The caption read, "3 generations, real roots, real love, #family first, #gratitude." In the photo, Verna, Cliff, Kendra, her husband, their kids. No Eli, no me, not even cropped, just non-existent. The final photo edit. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I sat there and read the caption again like it was a headline from some other life. But the internet didn't stay quiet. Someone reposted the image with a comment that sliced like glass. "Didn't your sister just take legal action over child exclusion? Real love, huh?" Then came the waves. Comments stacking up under her post like bricks falling one after the other. "Where's your nephew? Wasn't your sister part of this family? This is sad, not sweet." By noon, Kendra had disabled comments on the post. By 3 p.m., she locked her profile completely. I didn't say a word. I didn't hit like, didn't send a snarky DM, didn't feed the flames. I didn't have to. Later that night, Danica called. "There's been movement," she said, her tone measured. "Verna's church sent a request for character references from the congregation. Apparently, concerns have been raised." I sat still, holding my tea. What kind of concerns? Community complaints, a few referencing behavior inconsistent with church leadership values. They didn't mention names, but we know. The irony wasn't lost on me. Verna had always played the matriarch saint. Sunday dresses, volunteer drives, home-baked casseroles. But saints don't leave their grandchild's artwork in the trash. Kendra's business, meanwhile, a boutique real estate agency she'd launched a few years back, was suddenly flooded with anonymous one-star reviews. I read one of them aloud, barely suppressing a smirk. "Sells houses but forgets what a home means." That week, a parenting forum I followed reposted an anonymized version of our case under the headline, "How to Handle Generational Exclusion Without Losing Yourself." I didn't write it, but someone out there, maybe someone watching quietly, had been paying attention, and maybe they saw themselves in it. That evening, a voicemail came in from a blocked number. Verna. Her voice was tight, brittle, like she'd been holding her breath for days. "You win," she said flatly. "Happy now? We just wanted peace." That word, peace, it settled in my chest like dust on old glass. They didn't want peace. They wanted silence. I saved the voicemail and forwarded it to Danica. She told me she'd log it, not as legal leverage, but closure. It didn't need to be used. It just needed to be heard. Later that night, while brushing his teeth, Eli looked up at me in the mirror and said, "They miss us now, don't they?" I didn't blink. I just rinsed my mouth and met his eyes. Missing someone doesn't mean you treated them right. And that was that. No revenge, no firestorm, just the soft crack of a wall coming down. Missing someone doesn't mean you treated them right. Those words became the quiet anthem of my next few weeks. They echoed not in anger, not in triumph, just in truth. And truth, I've learned, doesn't have to shout. It just has to exist. 3 weeks passed. No new texts, no calls, no surprise knock at my door. Just silence. But this time, I didn't feel like I was drowning in it. This time, the silence felt like mine. Eli and I started walking the lake trail every Sunday morning. It had become our new ritual. No more forced family dinners or tension-wrapped holidays. Just a thermos of coffee, a juice box, and a quiet little path that didn't care what anyone's last name was. We'd stop at the bench by the water's edge, Dean's bench. I used to sit there with him when Eli was barely big enough to swing his legs off the edge. Now Eli sat cross-legged beside me, sketchbook open, tongue poking out in concentration as he tried to draw a heron lifting off from the reeds. "Looks like it's flying away from something," he said one morning, shading in the wings. "Or towards something," I replied. That bench didn't feel like a grave anymore. It felt like a starting point. A few days later, I checked the mailbox on my way back from the grocery store and found an envelope tucked between bills and coupons. No return address. My name written in Verna's exact, rigid cursive. I didn't open it in the car. I waited until Eli was in his room, humming while building a spaceship out of Legos. The card was plain, cream-colored, no design. Inside, just one line scribbled in that same familiar pen. "We didn't think you'd go this far. Maybe we misunderstood you. Maybe we were wrong." No apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done, just a breadcrumb masquerading as reconciliation. I folded it back up and walked to my bedroom, pulled open the drawer where I kept Eli's first birthday photo, the one I'd found in their trash. I placed the card underneath it. They could stay buried together. Saturday morning, as always, Edgar came by. Same time, same bag of sugar cookies, same dusty sweater that probably hadn't changed since 1997. He didn't ask about the letter. He never brought up Verna, Cliff, or Kendra. Instead, he challenged Eli to a chess match and lost gloriously for the 4th week in a row. Eli giggled, "You're letting me win again." Edgar winked, "Or maybe you're just getting too sharp for me." That kind of loyalty, simple, quiet, without conditions, it used to feel foreign. Now it just felt safe. That week, I went to therapy for the first time in years. I told my therapist everything. She listened without flinching, without filling in my pauses. At the end of the session, She said something I'll never forget. What they did to you wasn't personal, but your healing has to be. And I realized she was right. I wasn't doing this to prove them wrong anymore. I wasn't doing it to be included or validated. I was doing it to be free. That night, I opened my journal, one I hadn't touched since before the divorce. I wrote, "I didn't lose a family. I escaped one. And now we're building something better. Not louder, not bigger, but safer." I closed the cover, and I felt full for the first time in a long time. Later that evening, after brushing his teeth and climbing into bed, Eli looked at me and asked, "Do you think they still think about us?" I tucked the blanket under his chin and smoothed his hair. "Maybe," I said. "But thinking about someone doesn't fix what you did to them." He nodded slowly, eyes heavy with sleep. "I'm glad it's just us," he mumbled. "Me too, baby," I whispered. "Me too." To anyone reading this, watching this, if you've ever been the quiet one in the room, the one who was told to just keep the peace, to take the high road, to not make a scene, I hope you hear me now. Your silence was never a weakness. It was just waiting for the right time. And now, it's your time. Sometimes the deepest betrayal doesn't come with shouting matches or slammed doors. It comes in the quiet erasure of who we are. Marlene's story reminds us that choosing peace isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about protecting the space where you're truly seen and loved. Have you ever had to walk away from someone to find yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, stories of strength, truth, and healing, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Your voice matters here. Your story might be next.